It is early morning here in Utah, and I'm sitting in the red minivan in the garage. It's chilly too. I'm excited. This is one of my favorite times of year when we start to transition into fall. I love waking up and having that crisp morning air. Yeah, the fall leaves and everything's beautiful, but for me, it's all about the cold. I like that transition from sometimes the unbearable heat of summer into the cool into the coolness of fall and winter. I'm not a huge fan of winter. Come December, I'm going to be fed up with the snow and the cold and the bitterness. But this time, when everything's just slowly changing and you start to get a little chilly, I absolutely love that time. So I love this time. It's also been a bit since we've released a new episode, and I just love podcasting. I miss it. I miss it when I don't get to do it. I miss it when we don't get to release new episodes. It's kind of one of those things that I've had to really be patient with, because otherwise I would drive myself crazy. But luckily we have a new episode, and that's wonderful. And we're going to have a new episode next week, hopefully the following week, and then the weeks to come. I'm super excited. In just a few weeks, actually, Stephanie and I are going to be road tripping. I keep referring to it as that, road tripping. I guess it sounds like we're tripping over roads or that we're getting super high and driving down the road. We're probably not going to do either of those things, but we're getting in the van and we're going to be driving across California. And we've got a couple different things that we're going to be doing, but one of the main reasons we're doing that is strictly for podcasting. I've got a handful of interviews with people that I'm excited to meet and excited to chat with in person. So that's going to be super cool. We're going to have some really good episodes coming up in the next few weeks. If you happen to live somewhere in California and you're listening to this right now and you want to be on the podcast, please hit me up. Go to the website, click on the contact form, and let me know. We would love to swing by and chat, and you can be on the podcast. Right now, for the past several months, I have stopped shaving. I just decided that I was going to let my somewhat unruly beard continue to grow. Genetically speaking, I was not blessed with, and blessed is probably the wrong way to say it because it's fine the way that it is. However, I do not have the full, luscious, bearded, outdoorsy kind of looking beard. I've got like this really scruffy, patchy, long-haired, weird, bizarro beard, but it's mine and I like it and I don't care and I'm just letting it grow. Now, there is going to come a time when I decide that I need to rein it in a little bit, possibly shave it all off. And when that time comes, I bet you can guess where I'm going to be going to have that done. You're right. It's the Refinery Barbershop located in Springville, Utah. They've been sponsoring the podcast for quite some time, and I can't speak highly enough. Now, granted, they only kind of deal with men, right? Obviously, they're going to trim your beard, shave your face, give you a really, really kick-ass haircut. So sorry, ladies, you'll have to go get your hair done somewhere else. But if you are a man, and if you're looking for a really professional, high-class, but also that type of haircut that harkens back, and that type of environment that harkens back to the days when barbershops were far different than they are today, this is the place to go. Wonderful guys working there. It's a great environment. And you get that old school treatment, right? The hot towel, the straight razor shave. You get all of that there. So go check them out. You can also go to our website, find their links there. Go find them on social media. And then when you are in the area, if you live in Utah County, if you live in Utah, regardless, swing by the Refinery Barbershop and check them out. So I'm excited for this episode. It's episode, I believe, 115. I don't know what episode it is. It's the newest episode of the Energy is Love podcast with my guest, Desarae Lee. I found Desarae through a buddy of mine who lives in Kansas City. And he met Desarae and said, hey, this lady lives in Salt Lake. You should check her out. So I did. I reached out and we got the chance finally to sit down and record the interview. She's super relaxed, super chill. We recorded the interview at her studio space in Salt Lake City, which was kind of cool to kind of sit around in all of her stuff and absorb some of that while we were chatting. And it's a fun interview, man. Desarae did a really wonderful job of the first part of the episode because, as you guys know, if you listen to the podcast, I always talk to people about their mental issues and their mental health, and really just that broaches the topic and hopefully makes it easier for people to talk about, people to hear as well. And Desarae showed up. She did great. She did a wonderful job about speaking openly when it came to her struggles with depression, anxiety, all sorts of different things. And I loved it. It was wonderful. All in all, this is one of those episodes that I just love to do. I get to meet somebody new. I get to meet somebody that is living their life the way that they want to live, is passionate about what they do, and it's fun. It's a good episode. You guys are going to enjoy it. Desarae's got a new book coming out soon, along with a Kickstarter campaign. She talks a little bit about that, but I encourage you guys to go check out her work. You can find her at DesaraeLee.com. We've got the links in the show notes as well. She's on Instagram. If you're local and you need a piece of art or something commissioned, I guess is how they refer to it, hit her up. She does great work. Also, she travels a lot during the summertime, and she talks about that as well. So she's a really cool chick. Wonderful episode. Thank you so much, Desarae. Now everybody gets to sit back and relax and enjoy the newest episode of the Energy is Love podcast. Here we go.
You're listening to the Energy is Love podcast.
Energy is Love.
The Energy is the Love podcast.
The Energy is Love podcast.
Energy is Love.
The Energy is Love podcast.
The podcast for the universe.
The Energy is Love podcast.
It sounded great, right?
Yeah, it really did. Way better than me talking.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So Desarae.
Yes.
The very first question that I ask everybody on the podcast. Do you know what it is?
I feel like I should remember because I've listened to a few, but I don't remember what it is.
So the very first question that we talk about, and the reason being is because I like the idea that people listening hear this question, hear a bunch of people talk about this question, and it normalizes it in some sense of the word. So it makes it an easier conversation for people to have with themselves and with their loved ones and grand big scheme society as a whole. But the question is, what form of mental illness do you suffer from? Or if it's easier to address, what kind of issues do you struggle with when it comes to like your mental balance or your mental well-being on a regular basis?
Yes. Now that you say that, I do remember. I remember thinking, that's mean.
Yeah. It's a crappy it's tough. And sometimes I feel terrible asking it.
No.
But it's like that uncomfortable space that hopefully everybody can push themselves into.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm also very much about normalizing. So my, mental illnesses that I deal with are no secret. I enjoy an anxiety disorder.
Okay.
And I also have depression. And they pop up at different times with different faces, but they're always around.
Always around.
Mm-hmm.
When you say you have an anxiety disorder?
Yes.
Is there a specific name to it, or is it just a broad, in your mind, kind of, you suffer from anxiety?
I get panic attacks, and then I also have generalized anxiety disorder.
Okay. And is it something that you've had your whole life in one way, shape, or form? Both kind of depression and anxiety?
Pretty much. It mostly reared its ugly head. I had traumatic experiences as a child. My parents got divorced, and a whole slew of things resulting from that. And that's when it kind of started to rear its ugly head. But I've always been an anxious person and continue to be a fairly anxious person.
So it's something that you still kind of struggle with.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
And I think this is the other reason why I like talking about it, is because I think we really have to come up with new ways of describing these things, talking about these things, because I hate the words that we use for it. First off, like mental illness. I hate that. I think that it's such a silly, immediately it puts the connotation that there's something wrong with the person, that they're suffering from some sort of illness, like they need to get better from it. So I hate that. And my wife and I came up with just mental balance. Like, where do you, not even struggle, because struggle, I think, is one of those things, but what space do you continually work towards mental balance, right? In the happy place where everything's nice, but then you have other ends of the spectrums where things are challenging at times.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I really like that. I like that because I think for me, it's a matter of accepting that this isn't something that's ever going to go away. Like, it's not like a cold that you just wait for it to go away and you get better from. It's definitely a part of who I am, and I learn to live with it. I don't look forward to a day when I'll be without it, because it won't happen.
Yeah. I mean, it is just part of you, right? And it's part of everybody. Like, that's the thing. The more people that I talk to and the more I kind of look at it in the slide, it's like everybody has some form of issue when it comes to their mental well-being and balance. Some space where they are challenged, periods of time in their life where they face tons of adversity, or they have some traumatic experience or something like that, and it throws them into a tailspin, and then they have to bring themselves back to this happy, balanced place. And everybody's always different, right? There's extremes on one end of the spectrum where people really struggle in that space. But by and large, I think across the board, all of us have struggles with our mental well-being and health.
Yeah, I think I would really agree with that. And I think there's definitely, people that it knocks farther out of whack, people that have a really hard time functioning with their mental disorder. But I think everybody definitely struggles to some degree, like looking at a spectrum as opposed to yes or no.
Yeah, it's because it's not black and white.
No, it's definitely not.
And even like on an individual basis, like for me, I have PTSD, and there's times when it kind of manifests differently at different time periods when I'm feeling X, Y, or Z, and it's more intense. And then there's other times when it's really mild, and then there's other times when it's non-existent. But for me to walk around and think like, oh, I have PTSD and I'm, cursed with this diagnosis. And it's like, I mean, I don't have an issue labeling that struggle that I deal with. But the fact is, like, it's not debilitating. And at times it has been, but it's not now. It may be again in the future, and it may not, right? It always comes and goes. And it's not the only thing that I deal with. I too have anxiety issues and depression and all sorts of other things that and once again, like the verbiage is so hard, right? Because we think struggle, and then we think, fuck, we're not good enough, and we're weak, and it's like I'm failing in some way. And it's like, no, this is just normal everyday life that people have to balance out.
Yeah.
It's no different than our physical fitness.
Yeah. This is just my life. I used to think of it in college. I thought of it as like a game because my anxiety went through like a morph and popped up as something else. And it seems like every few years it pops up as something new and exciting. And in my head, it's just like a game. Like, oh, you're a friend. You've been gone so long. I'm glad you're back. What an interesting mask you're wearing. Let's learn how to deal with this. Obviously, it's not fun at all, but it's a way that I try to think about it to make it less terrifying.
Yeah, it evolves, right? It evolves along with you as you evolve.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And if you don't mind, I'd like you to talk about what a panic attack is for you. So kind of how it manifests, what you physically feel during that time period, what it looks like if somebody's, maybe somebody that's with you is seeing you go through this or whatever.
Yeah. I had them so bad for a period in my life that I'm lucky to have gotten to a point where I can have a panic attack and nobody except my partner will know. Or people who know me really well might figure it out, but most people can't tell. I've gotten to a point where it can happen and it's horrible. I mean, it's probably the worst feeling I've ever had. But I've gotten to a point where I don't give a lot of outward symptoms because I've had it so that I have to still be able to function with it. I have not as bad as anymore, but there was a point in my life where it was like every day. There were days when it seemed like it was all day. So I've had to learn how to not show outward symptoms and just be able to somehow function with this going on.
What does it feel like internally?
Internally, it feels, this is how I describe it to people. I describe it as being in a car and you've got your seatbelt on and you just fly off the side of a bridge into the water. And your car is sinking and it's filling up with water and you have to escape and your seatbelt is stuck and you can't do anything about it. So you're going to die. Your brain knows you're going to die and you can't do anything. And that's what a panic attack is. It's like my brain knows I'm going to die even though there's nothing I can do to fix it.
Yeah. That's terrible.
Yeah.
Like that's
awful.
A really difficult space to be in.
It's really terrible. Yeah.
Because you still have that other part of your brain that's like, this is just a panic attack. I'm okay. And trying to rationalize. And then I shouldn't say for sure, but my guess is you probably have that internal dialogue too, where it's like, you should get over this already. You should be done with this already. This is something that you're stronger than. You shouldn't let it, make you feel this way and things like that.
Yeah, I've been lucky to have a very good therapist for years and years who's led me away from the should and the, it should be done, it should be over. But definitely, like, for years and years, it was very frustrating to think that, like, why am I still struggling with this? And I do go back there sometimes, like, why is this still a thing for me?
Mm-hmm. And what have you done in order to kind of both of these, like anxiety and depression? What have you done to cope with them, to manage with them, to try to bring balance back into that space?
Oh, it's still an ongoing battle. I think it's really, really important for me to manage things consistently in my life. So managing regular exercise and managing my sleep is really important. And those little things that you don't see an immediate effect from, for me, become really, really important. I recently learned that managing my stress and the amount of effort I'm putting into things every day is very important for managing that. So I feel like there are tools to manage in the moment, right? But those everyday tools have just been so important for me, you know, yoga, meditation. Sometimes I'm better at doing it than others, but...
Yeah. And can you see a difference? Like if you're managing, and because it sounds like routine, right? Like if you're kind of in the flow of a good routine and you stay in that space, do you notice, like, is it a noticeable difference when you stop and look at it?
Definitely. And it's been really hard with my career because there is so little routine.
Mm-hmm.
I travel a lot. So, which is something I'm trying to change. But when I am able to be home for a month or two at a time, it really, like, everything just calms down. It's really nice.
Yeah. And you said that you feel like you're always going to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. How
does that make you feel?
When I first realized that, it was really depressing. I think I cried for a long time when I came to that actual realization. Now, you know, I gotta be honest, I don't think that's something I've wrapped my head around. Like, that's not true. I feel like I've accepted it. Like, I know I'm always going to have these problems. But it is really hard. And the thought that this is just the rest of my life, like this is just how it's going to be, is sometimes overwhelming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to speak about myself in hopes that maybe it gives you some insight, okay? Some ways to look at things. Because I've done a whole bunch of, like, internal self-work in regards to not just how I think and how I, talk to myself and how I behave and how I move through life and how I look at situations and how I do all of these different things. And I've thought about how, for me, one of the big differences, because I feel like, I'm trying to think of the way that it manifests the most, like depression probably, right? Depression for me has its, like undertones. And when I start to recognize those undertones kind of creep into my life, I realize, oh, something is happening, or I'm feeling a certain way, or I'm headed down the path, or something like that, where I can start to recognize some of the early phases of what depression would be for me, right? Some triggering things or some patterns. It's pattern recognition. Mm-hmm. And when I started to be able to recognize some of those patterns, then I would go back and figure out, or try to figure out, because it's challenging, but try to figure out where those patterns started and where they stemmed from. And then in that process, it was like putting the big puzzle together, right? I can see the pattern manifest in my current life and where I'm at and where I'm, like who I am today, and then figure out where that pattern would manifest in my past and maybe where it started or where I picked it up from. And then I was able to get some of those pieces for that time period in my life, which then gave me more pieces for where I was at now. And then I can understand the pattern better. And it's an ongoing process because it just continually like evolves, right? The more you peel back, the more you see, the more you put together, it's almost like you get to see more and more and more of the pattern. And it becomes super intricate. It becomes super like in-depth in the pattern that exists in the way that I believe everybody kind of moves through life. And so that's helped me a lot recognize early stages of behavior and patterns that I know would eventually manifest in much bigger ways that I can recognize, but sometimes you get lost in them, right? Like if you get lost into depression, sometimes it takes a while of being in that space before you're like, shit, I'm depressed and I'm really miserable. And
Oh, I'm here.
yeah, like, why am I here again? I don't want to be here. I hate this place. And then you have to fight to get back out of it. And so by recognizing some of the patterns that would lead me to that space, I can then avoid going back down into that space so much and continue on with my life because, oh yeah, I can see that pattern. And then I have all of these healthy behaviors, you know, routines and other patterns that I've implemented with, you know, meditation or journaling or exercise or just like mindfulness and conscious awareness. And even just the act of recognizing patterns that would pop up is almost like this whole mindful act of itself, because you really have to be conscious of your thought process and what you're feeling and how you're moving through life.
Yeah.
And so those kind of techniques and steps have really helped me to avoid some of those pitfalls that I used to fall down into quite frequently.
Yeah. I love that you just said that. Maybe this is a little TMI, but that's literally like the last 2 therapy sessions I've had. It's exactly what my therapist has been talking to me about. So that's, I love that you just brought that up. Thank you.
It's good stuff, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. And that totally reinforces that for me. Yeah.
How long have you been in therapy?
Off and on since I was about 13.
About 13.
Yeah.
Have you ever been medicated?
Oh, yeah. Currently.
Currently
I'm being
medicated?
medicated. Yes.
And how do you deal with that? Because that too has a stigma, I believe, attached to it in society.
Yeah, it was actually just hard for me to just say that. Yeah. It took a long time for me to admit that I needed it. Years. So, you know, when I started going to therapy, I was medicated, hated it. And since then, I've just been opposed to it for me. You know, fine for other people.
Isn't
Not
that
okay
funny
for
how we justify that? It's good for other people.
Yeah,
It's just not for
but
me.
I don't need it.
Yeah.
So it took me hitting a very low to finally realize that, you know, it was time for me to try something out, that there was actually a dangerous problem in my brain that I wasn't going to be able to deal with without help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And does it help? Do you feel like it makes a difference in some way, shape, or form?
Yes, it doesn't fix everything. And I've tried some different ones, and some of them are just worse. Some make everything worse. But when I found ones that work, it's not the kind of thing that fixes everything, but it's the kind of thing that just takes that little bit of darkness off, and makes things just a little more manageable for me.
Yeah. And that's the other thing too, right? Everybody's different, obviously.
Yeah.
Where, I mean, some people need a ginormous cocktail of different things, and some people don't. And I don't know, I struggle in the space of medication when it comes to mental health. I think that the system as a whole is super jacked up. And I think that there's definitely time and a place for it where it's beneficial. I think that it's massively misused, both like from the perspective of the people prescribing it as well as the people taking it. However, I think that it is very much something that is needed. And I don't know how to fix that part. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like, totally. There's too many of them. The side effects, the differences, the things that it actually does to your body on top of what it's supposed to be doing, and all the different things, and just the chaos that ensues, right? Trying to mitigate the symptoms by taking more medication that give you more weird symptoms and this, that, and the other, right? All to try to achieve some sort of mental balance. In my mind, it's like, that's just a ginormous big ball of chaos. And you're adding it on top of like the big ball of chaos that you're already dealing with. And so it's just like more and more and more chaos. But having said that, because I can see you thinking, you're like, I don't know, maybe it is.
No. I'm thinking like, I don't know if I agree with that.
Well, tell me what you think.
I do agree with a lot of your points. I think more than anything in my mind, taking medication for mental health has such a huge stigma in a lot of cultures. In the culture that I grew up in, huge stigma, which I think is why it was so hard for me.
What was that culture?
I grew up Mormon.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm LDS or whatever we're calling it now. So I feel like it's so much more important to overcome that stigma. And I feel like a lot of the problems you're talking about are just problems with the healthcare system and pharmaceuticals in general, which we don't need to go into. But I think if you are being prescribed something by somebody who knows you, my therapist and my prescriber work in tandem, they work together. And there is still definitely chaos that ensues, but at that point in my life, it was so much more important for me to have it. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to pry. Like, I always feel bad that I'm like sitting over in this space of like prying into your personal life.
I'll tell you if it's too much.
But I love that. This is why I love this conversation surrounding all of these different things, because it's uncomfortable, right? Mm-hmm. It's the stuff that people don't want to talk about. It's the stuff that we want to pretend doesn't really exist. Mm-hmm. And we don't want other people to know about it. And we want to hide it. And everything's really fine. And my grass is really green. And everything's happy and hunky-dory. When in reality, not that everything is shit, but in reality, every single person that exists is dealing with something and is struggling in some way, shape, or form, right? And it's so silly for us to move through life with this falseness that we put forth into the world so that people don't really see who we are. Mm-hmm. It's like you have to step forward into the space of vulnerability in order for people to see who you really are. Mm-hmm. And that's challenging and that's hard. But when you do that, and I've seen this time and time again, when you do that, you then allow them to do the same thing. And then they step into the space with you and they're like, hey, look, I'm vulnerable as well. This is what I deal with. This is what I suffer from. This is my life and how it is. And we can connect and then humanize it. And then, everybody can relax a little bit and be much, much more, not just understanding, because I think that the vast majority of people are understanding when it comes to other people, right? We accept the fact that other people struggle with things, and we allow for that, and we're understanding and we accept that, right? We may be somewhat judgmental, but at the end of the day, I think the vast majority of society is like, yeah, that's okay. Yeah. But I think that very, very few people can do that with themselves.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Isn't that so strange how we're so generous with other people?
Yeah. Like we're totally okay accepting the fact that, other people deal with that, and we can love them for who they are and we can accept them and it's okay and you're going to get through this and blah, blah, blah. Right. But then we internalize it and like, well, if only they knew, like, I can't really, Right. And it's like that part of accepting ourselves and all of our faults or all of the things that make us who we are, people don't do. Yeah. So that's the other part of this conversation that I really like, even though it's uncomfortable and it's hard. So if you're willing to, yes. I mean,
I'm all excited to hear what you're going to say.
Well, if you're willing to, because I kind of get a sense of what you're talking about, and I may be wrong, but if you're willing to, I would really like you to talk about what was the catalyst for you getting on medication at the time? Oh, yeah, no, that's fine. I the last few years have tried to make a point of being really open with all of my mental struggles, just for the reasons we stated up front. So as long as it doesn't hurt anybody else, I'm willing to talk about these things. Well, I think it can only help other people. Yes. So the catalyst was, so I had been avoiding pills for a lot of reasons. I was afraid of how it was going to affect my art. I wanted to just deal with everything naturally. I didn't think my depression and anxiety were that bad. I had just recently been come around to accept that I had depression. This was maybe 4 years ago-ish. And I just had one night where I don't even remember what the catalyst was, but I essentially lost my mind. I feel like I lost my mind. I think it was a combination anxiety attack, my depression coming to a head. And I got into a space for the first time ever, and not many times since, but I got into a space where I just wasn't myself. My brain just wasn't functioning properly. Things didn't make sense, or things that normally wouldn't make sense made sense. I didn't get to a place where I felt like hurting myself, but I was in a space where I totally understood how people would want to hurt themselves and how that would make sense to them.
Because me sitting here in front of you can easily say, like, I would never do that to the people I love ever. But when you're in that space, and I've only been there 2 or 3 times in my life, you're not you. You're not thinking like that. You're just thinking, like, your brain just isn't working. It's like you're not even thinking. Things just aren't making sense. I don't know a better way to describe it than that. I wish I did. It's not like the dark places I've been, although it is a very dark place. It's like a broken place.
Kind of very detached, right?
Detached, yeah. Which I also get detached at other times. So maybe just in the extreme, like detached and like so far detached that something just breaks. Mm-hmm. And I was lucky to have my partner there with me, so nothing too scary happened. But I've been in that place 1 or 2 times since then, and it's a scary place.
So I want to be clear, like the space of having suicidal thoughts.
The place where suicide didn't seem like a bad idea. Yeah. Again, no plan to kill myself, no intention of doing so, but having the thought come up and having it be like, yeah, like that seems like a valid option. Like, yeah, that's something that makes sense. Or is in normal everyday life, like that doesn't make sense at all, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's how it is for people who have been there, but that's how it has happened for me.
I think it's super normal. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it's super normal.
Do you think so?
I really, really do.
Go there?
I really do. And I think it's so silly that we think it's not, right? I fly a lot. So I fly all over the country and do shit, and it drives me nuts. I hate flying. I don't mind the act of flying. I just hate airports. But I've had times where I'm flying, or I'm going to be taking off tomorrow and I'm getting on the plane, or I'm thinking about this upcoming trip, and I'm like, yeah, plane could just crash. Like, plane crashes, that's okay. And, I'm like, it would be easier if the plane would just crash. And like, it makes me very, very sad when I think of myself, and that there was at some point in my mental space where I was there in that space. Because the fact is, I love life. I love who I am. I have a beautiful family. I've got 4 kids, a happy marriage, right? I've got all of these amazing things that fill my life up. But there were points, and like not even 10, 15 years ago, like last year, right? Not long ago, where I'm like, yeah, plane can crash, and I'm going to be okay with that. That's going to be easier for me if I just die.
It's
right.
Yeah.
And like, that's sad.
Yeah.
But I think it's normal.
Yeah.
I think it's normal for people to have those thoughts. I also think it's normal for people because like we're kind of tiptoeing around this space because it's difficult to talk about. Mm-hmm. But this is like, I think, the precursor to formulating a plan. Yeah. Right. And then once you formulate a plan, then you have to actually enable and put that plan into action. And like, if we think about and break down the steps of suicide and what happens and what takes place, and, look at it from a very, I was going to say mathematical, and it's not math, but analytical point of view, right? Mm-hmm. You could probably track it most times, right? Yeah. You could see the process that people went through. And I think that the precursor to that process, or maybe the first step of that process, is really getting to that point where you're like, yeah, I could die today and life would be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've been there. That actually happens more. Yeah. But that always, like, when I'm capable of analytical thought, it's easy to be like, yeah, but, and then I think of my partner and my dog and my family and how sad they would be. And that's always like, that's not an option for me. Right. But there's definitely a space I go to where it's just like, they just don't even come into my mind. Yeah. Not a space that I go to, a space that I've been a few times.
Yeah. And it's hard because, the fact is, life is beautiful, right?
Oh, it's incredible.
Yeah. It's so beautiful for so many different reasons. Like, just step outside and open up your eyes and take in the glory that is planet Earth and what we get to look at and be a part of and feel and smell and see and hear, right? Beautiful. But for some reason, we forget all of those things.
Right. Or there are just days when you can't see those things.
Yeah.
Like for me, it's like I can't see those things some days. And then I just have to remember that the days that I can see those things are worth the days that I can't.
Yeah. And this is the other thing that I remind myself too of quite often. It's like I'm still here. Like the most difficult, horrendous things that I've had to live through, experience, go through, the most deepest, darkest, depressed hole full of shame and guilt and remorse that I've been in, I've gotten through.
Yeah.
Like everything I have survived and gotten through.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, I mean, it's not to say that people that don't get through things and that people that do take their own lives are in some way, shape, or form weak or less than.
Yeah.
Not at all.
No.
It's just that, yeah, I've gotten through quite a bit of stuff and I really, really like life. I really like being here, you know?
Yeah.
And it's just trying to remind myself of those things at times.
Yeah.
But it's a slippery slope and it's hard. And I think that it's so silly for us to think that anybody out there has their shit together.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? I think there's people that hide it really well. I think there's people there are much better at balancing their shit, but nobody has everything figured out. Right. Everybody is in constant state of flux and evolution and trying to balance out. And not to say that everybody is trying to balance out their ship. Like everybody's trying to balance out life, right?
Yeah.
And trying to keep balance and harmony so that they can live a peaceful, happy, connected life full of joy and love and all these kind of different things.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I think that's what everybody's after in some way, shape, or form, even if it's subconscious. Okay.
Oh, that was hard.
It was a big conversation.
Let's talk about clowns or something.
Yeah. Clowns. Thank you, though. Like I always feel, I've asked, because I've been doing the podcast for a long time, but I just recently this year started off trying to do every single episode with that question because I like the conversations that it sparks and I like learning more about people, right? And some people suck at doing that. I've asked people that question before and they give it's funny too, because most people will talk about depression and anxiety as their go-tos. People are comfortable saying that they have depression and I have a little bit of anxiety from time to time. And that's kind of where some people just like stopping and they don't want to go past that. But the fact is those things are huge, right? Because they're not one thing. Depression isn't, I feel sad on Sundays and then Monday I'm better. Depression is huge and all encompassing, sometimes for months and years at a time, depending upon the situation. And so I like learning about somebody and what they've experienced, not because it's like, ooh, gossip, and I like to hear about how fucked up they are. I like to know people, right? I like to know who you are. And then I also think that the people that listen can now think about that conversation that we just had and the things that you shared and the things that we discussed. And in some way, shape, or form, it's going to give them the thought process to think about it after the fact.
Yeah.
And they're going to turn off this episode and they're going to go about their everyday and they're going to be thinking about their depression or their anxiety, or maybe the fact that they thought, I'm driving home from work and it would just be much easier if I just fall asleep and drift into the barricade and my car explodes. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But normalizing it so that they feel like they're not alone, because nobody's alone in this world. We're all way more similar than we are different.
Yeah.
And then hopefully everybody can just relax a little bit and open up and talk to people and connect with their loved ones. And
right. Well, and just be okay with it. I mean, there's definitely such a thing as like oversharing. I think
maybe.
I think, but I think it's important too in this conversation to say that that's definitely a part of what I deal with. But it's not a big part of who I am.
Exactly.
Like it's a big part of what I deal with. But a very small part of who I am, or maybe like who I try to be.
Yeah. It doesn't define you by any means.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. We are it's like I was talking about the pattern and how it changes and evolves and gets more intricate, but we as people evolve and get more I can't say that word. More diverse.
I like listening to you try to say it though, so please keep going.
But that process takes place over our entire life, right? And so the fact that you struggle in the space of depression and anxiety does not define who you are.
Yeah.
And it's a very small portion of what you are, and also probably what you deal with, right?
Yeah.
And what you kind of try to cope and manage and move through every day with.
Yeah.
So tell me who you are.
Oh gosh. I'm Desarae. Did we not establish that?
Yes, Desarae Lee, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. Who am I? I don't think I know that.
Well, who do you tell people you are?
Oh, I've got my one sentence spiel. I'm an artist and illustrator.
Okay.
I work in Salt Lake City, Utah. I draw. I do printmaking. And I like being outside. I love my mountains.
Yeah.
That pretty much sums up who I am on a very shallow level. Yeah.
So go deeper. You're an artist and an illustrator.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what does that mean? I mean, obviously we know what that means, but what kind of art?
I draw and I do printmaking.
What's printmaking?
Printmaking is the act of, the way I do it is called dry point. So I will scratch an image into a plexiglass plate, and then ink goes onto the plate, and then you press paper and the plate together, and then you have a print. So, I mean, the simplest way to think of it is like a stamp, although any printmaker who's listening to this is going to want to punch me in the face. But when I'm explaining it to children, I say it's like making a stamp, and then you stamp it onto the paper. So that's printmaking. And that's a recent development in my career, just the last 2 or 3 years I've been doing that. Yeah.
How did your career start out?
I started teaching art, and part-time started showing like in coffee shops, and there was a little local gallery that showed my stuff. So it started out very part-time, and then I did my first Utah Arts Festival and realized that I could do this as a living. So I spent about another year or so part-time, and then...
People listening, like the Utah Arts Festival is a huge event.
Yeah.
No, you're okay. Because it's, I mean, people, because we've all been to an arts festival of one, but the Utah Arts Festival, it's like a 3, 4, or 5 day long.
It's 4 days long.
Yeah.
And it is one of the major arts festivals in Utah, for sure. Yeah.
So you realized after doing one of those, you're like, wait a minute, there's something here.
Yeah, like I could make a living doing this.
Yeah.
Which came at a really good time because I realized that I didn't love teaching. I realized pretty quickly I didn't love teaching. And that, coincided with realizing that I could do art full time, maybe if I worked really hard.
Were you like a school teacher, an art teacher?
Mm-hmm. I taught art for a few years, and then I taught photography for a few years.
Like in high school?
In high school, yeah.
What didn't you like about it? I can only imagine. I can't imagine teaching teenagers.
Yeah. I don't dislike children individually, but in groups I tend to dislike children.
Yes.
They're very hard in groups, and I wasn't born with that natural desire to help them make themselves better. I was born with the natural desire to want them to go away from me. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're terrible. Especially at that age, like teenagers.
Oh my gosh.
I have teenagers, right? And
okay, so you
them.
know.
Yeah, they're wonderful, individually.
Exactly.
But anytime, they're just terrible. I can't even imagine trying to be a teacher of high school students.
It takes a special person, and having that experience is good because I respect teachers so much, and not just in that way that you're like, oh yeah, teachers are great, but in that way that's like, you do so much work. And you really, really have to have a big heart to want to do that forever.
So you said you did the arts festival and you realized I can do this for a living. I can, make this work.
Yeah.
What did that look like? Because I think that's what a lot of people, because it's a passion, right? I said, how did it start? My guess is you probably have been an artist and drawing in one way, shape, or form your whole life, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so how do you take that passion, that skill, that thing that you're really good at, and turn it into a career and something that you can make a living at?
Yeah. Well, the way I did it was probably the worst way to do it, which is just I taught myself along the way, and made a lot of mistakes. There is so much to know when you're running your own business, let alone being an artist. So I mean, we can talk about the way I wish I would have started to help people, or we can just talk about the way I started.
Well, what were some of the big mistakes that you wish you hadn't have made?
I really, really wish that I had a business class in my background when I went to college. I feel like it's really silly to send art students out into the world without some kind of business background. And I really wish I would have been better at bookkeeping and finances and just all of the things that are so not my forte. I wish I would have tried really hard to be good at. yeah, I feel like that would have made my road here a little bit, I would have been able to avoid some debt probably.
Yeah.
Had I been smarter about just business in general. I'm slowly teaching myself marketing. I think that's something that's really important to know. Took me a long time to get to a point, and even now I don't really ever feel like I know what I'm doing when I'm marketing. I pretend like I'm somebody who knows what they're doing, and that helps. Yeah, so all those really boring things, I think, are the things that would be really important, that I wish I would have put more effort into when I was starting.
Yeah. So tell me, like, how does an artist make a living being an artist?
Every way, shape, or form. I'm lucky to work with a lot of artists here at the Downtown Artist Collective. And for me, it looks like I make art, and then I travel around the country doing things very similar to the Utah Arts Festival. So I just do that all over the country. And it's a really nice, direct, I make the art, people buy the art. Sometimes people commission the art. On the side, I'll often do some illustrations. So, I just finished a book with a publisher and hoping to be able to publish my own book soon. But really, it always kind of feels like a hustle, like you're always looking for ways that your art can support you when you're making a living as an artist solely. I know plenty of really wonderful artists around here that make a living, pay their rent or their mortgage doing something else, and then are an artist, part-time. And I don't think, there's nothing less valid about that at all.
Yeah.
At all.
Totally. Somebody coming in upstairs, right?
Yeah. Can we pause?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Not the first time we've had scheduling conflicts.
Yeah.
With these guys. For some reason, none of their stuff got on the calendar.
That's no big deal.
Okay. I've completely lost track of where we were.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Lucky for you, I'm a good host.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I don't know where the hell we were either, but I do have a question.
Yeah.
Because one of the things you said I wanted to ask you about, because you talked about how it's kind of like a hustle, right? Mm-hmm. Where you're always trying to hustle and make money and do different things and figure out different ways that you can do this, that, or the other, right? To make a living.
Yes.
And I think that is like people that are entrepreneurs, people that are working for themselves, people that have decided to kind of quit some regular 9-to-5 job or something like that. That's what it feels like. That's the reality where it is a hustle. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to accept that because it's a different dynamic than what we would typically, it's a different dynamic than what we're taught. It's a different dynamic than what we think of when we are going to be an adult and we're going to grow up and we're going to get our shit together and we're going to have our life. Right? We always think that we're going to have some job and that's it.
Yeah.
But the fact is, I think that dynamic of like graduate from high school, go to college, find your career, work 20 years, retire. Like, I think all of that shit's just done and over and it doesn't work anymore.
No, it really doesn't. I was listening to a different podcast or the news or something that was addressing this specifically, people going into retirement now and then people kind of going into the workforce now. That it's a completely different mindset. So many of us need to be or have chosen to be entrepreneurs. And there's just not a huge space other than a few industries for people who just want to go work a 9-to-5 and then go home. Like just financially, it just doesn't work anymore. Mm-hmm. Which I guess is good for creativity, but maybe bad for some ways for sure.
Oh my goodness, I feel a sneeze coming on.
Here it comes.
It's not going. I brought attention to it, so it's going to hide now. So how hard is that? Like that grind? Because I think that people I've got a buddy of mine who he just recently got a job after being out of work for a while, and he's an artist as well. And for him, I think he had some hesitation in his thought process and, the dynamic of like, how can I make a living doing art? Because I think that we get caught up in thinking that our source of income or what we do for our source of income has to be singular as opposed to multiple sources of income coming in, right? Mm-hmm. And my guess is that's kind of what it's like for you, right? Where you're getting money from this avenue and from that avenue and from doing this and doing that. And Like, what is that like? How hard is that?
Oh, it's that's easy. It's hard. It's quite hard. I might be going on to a segue, but I think when it comes to art, people get very snobby about who an artist is or what an artist is. And the people who make their living with just art want to say, well, I'm an artist because, that's what my taxes say. I tell the government I'm an artist because that's where all my money comes from. And the people who are making art and they don't get paid for it and they just put it in galleries and it's not the type of art that can be sold. Well, I'm a real artist because it's contemporary and it's part of the everyday conversation. And I think it's really easy to get caught up in, like, how can I make money as an artist so that all of my income is art? And I don't think that makes much sense, especially when you're starting out. But even for people who've been doing it for a long time, that doesn't make sense necessarily. And I've been through periods in my art career when I was a full-time artist when I had to do things like lift and sometimes I'll still do it because I think it's fun. But I completely lost track of what the original question was, but I feel very strongly that the art world is not somewhere where you just, I'm an artist or they're an artist and I'm not, or I'm an artist and they're not. And
it's not that singular thing, right? Where I'm a plumber, so all my money comes from being a plumber.
Yeah.
And this is my job and this is my career and that's all that I do, right?
Yeah.
I think when you have these things, art is what we're talking about because you're an artist, but there's plenty of things like in the space of, I hate the word entrepreneur as well. I think it's being used to ad nauseum about people that are just lazy and want to post it on Instagram about being an entrepreneur. But in the space when you're hustling, right?
Yeah.
You're hustling for money. You're hustling for to sustain your life, but you're doing things that feed your soul and you're creative and you're doing things differently than society has done things for the past 150 years.
Yeah.
And I think in that space, you have to be open to stretching outside of not just your comfort zone, but like what you think, right? So if you just pigeonhole yourself as an artist, then you're going to miss all these other opportunities, not necessarily where you'll make money, but possibly,
right?
But also other opportunities where you're going to have some other sort of inspiration or creative outlet, or this connection leads to that connection, and then this, that, and the other, right?
Right.
And I think that's massively important. Have you seen that,
so
like
too.
with your career and things like that?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's massively important, like you said, for people not to pigeonhole themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I had a really smart thought and it flew away. Oh, that's what I was going to say. So sometimes I feel like for many, many of us who are artists, the job isn't just making art. Like, I feel like a lot of people come to being artists and they say, I'm going to make these beautiful things that I feel and make, and it's going to be wonderful. And so much of my job is making things that people want me to make.
Yeah.
And drawing things that I don't necessarily want to draw, but somebody's going to give me money that'll cover my rent for, and I love everything I draw to some extent or another, but I'm not always drawing my soul. Right. So whether that part of my life is, that part is a job. That's the hustle, right? So if you want to call, the pure art, that happens very seldomly for me. And I know that's not true for everyone. But I think a lot of us have to find that balance. A lot of us as artists have to find that balance between making things that people will give us money for and making what's in the depths of our soul, and kind of where that balance lies.
Do you still find time to make things that are from the depths of your soul?
Yes.
Because that's super important.
Yes. It depends on the season. But I do.
Do you ever just do art for yourself? It's something that you're not even thinking about, how can I sell this, or if I'm going to take this to this next festival, or
yeah.
Do you ever just do work for yourself?
I do, not as often as I'd like to. Everything I draw, I do sell. Lots of reasons for that, but I rarely but do get the chance to just make something to try it or because I feel it. Yeah.
Wait, you mentioned that you're going to be publishing a book, right?
Yes.
Is that something that was just like part of your soul that you wanted to create and get out?
Partially, yes. There are things about the book that are things that I feel strongly about.
Mm-hmm.
It's very much my sense of humor. So it's not, some of it is like it's a pair of books. And one of the books, the main character is, you know, a strong, independent woman. And I feel like that's very important to put out into the world right now. And that's a message that's really close to my soul is a woman who learns to be, well, a child, but a female child who learns to be independent. But then the second book is very much just like my sense of humor and me having fun and hoping other people have fun with it too. So,
what's that process been like for you?
It's been different.
Yeah.
Making a book is very different from making just a piece of art. Because in my art, all the story is right there in one piece. And in the book, it's like prolonging the story. And that's a really big mental shift for me for some reason.
What other kind of creative outlets do you have?
Oh, creative outlets. I sing in the shower. I would say that drawing is my one big creative outlet, honestly, that I'm willing to admit to.
Well, what else do you do to feed your soul?
Oh, honey, I go outside. I climb and I hike and being outside feeds my soul.
Have you always
massively.
Are you from Utah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I grew up in the mountains, so they're very much a part of who I am.
You can't beat the mountains here.
Oh, they're so good.
Yeah, we're super spoiled. Sometimes I forget.
It's true.
Yeah, and then I'll like come back home and I'm like, oh my gosh, like we're just surrounded by these beautiful mountains.
It's so true. It's a really unique. It's easy to get down on Utah, but it's such a uniquely beautiful place. Like I think that just trumps everything else about it.
Yeah, it is hard, I think, because I grew up here in Utah, and I grew up thinking that it was such a boring, terrible place to live, and as soon as I could, I was going to get the hell out of here, and now when I think about Utah, yes, there's obviously things about it that I don't like, but those don't really matter. Like they don't really affect my life. And then I look at it more and more recently. I've been looking at it more about how just like aesthetically beautiful the place is, right? We can at any given point drive and 20 minutes later be up in some canyon or, in the mountains and see lakes and go south and see the red rock and the desert. And it's like we are kind of really spoiled in this state. And I think it's, not to say that other states aren't beautiful, but it's kind of unique in itself, right?
Yeah.
Because we
definitely
have a wide variety of nature that doesn't exist everywhere else.
Yeah, variety of nature. And just people come from all over the world to see things in Utah. Like we have really incredible stuff here. And growing up here, just like you, I totally took it for granted. And again, like same way, gonna get out of here as soon as I can. I hate this place. And then I did some traveling and I was like, wait, like I live in a really cool place. I'm just going to stay here.
Yeah. How often do you travel?
The last few years it's been mostly for work. So about once a year I'll try to get out of the country somewhere. Just because I think traveling to other countries is really, really important. But, every summer I'm traveling all over the US. So it's, I would say about half and half for most of the spring, summer. I'm home and half I'm out doing shows. Yeah.
Where was the last, you said you travel abroad or out of the country. Where was the last place you went?
Where is the last place? I think it was Iceland.
Oh my goodness.
Iceland, maybe. Yeah. There was probably one in between that I'm not thinking of.
What did you go there for?
Oh no, the last one's Italy. Just vacation.
Really?
That was pure vacation. Yeah. I also have been teaching a drawing class in Italy, like a little travel and draw class. So that was the last place I went, and then it was Iceland before that. Yeah.
What was Iceland like?
It was so amazing. I know it's becoming very popular to travel there, and it totally makes sense because it's like you'll see these beautiful cliffs and waterfalls, and they're just like in some farmer's backyard. Like you drive around, you just drive around the country, and literally, like, I mean, it's kind of like here in the sense that you just see beautiful things, and you realize like the people who live there are just like, that's just what their country looks like.
Yeah.
Like that's just what it looks like. And it's this great dichotomy of, you know, the volcanoes and the glaciers, and all the people were very, very friendly. It was absolutely beautiful, like just breathtaking.
That's way cool.
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't think that the, you know, I don't want to say struggling artist, but the artist that's hustling would get the opportunity to vacation to Iceland.
Yes.
Right.
I am really good budget traveler. Really. And I travel with my partner, so he pays for half of things and I pay for half of things. And part of the hustle is trade. Like I've traveled some places trading, you know, like a condo. So I'll trade art for someone who will give me a week at their condo, or like, that's all part of the hustle, my friend. Like
That's the way to do it though,
Yeah.
right? That's looking outside of the box.
Yeah, for sure.
Where you're not sitting there being like, God, this art, I love this art. How am I going to make this work? You're
Yeah.
like, we'll make it work.
Yeah. But in my mind, like travel is worth making sacrifices for, you know? So if it takes me saving, you know, for my, I'm looking 2 years in advance for my next big trip, and I'm like, okay, I need to start saving now. And if that's like $5 a week and I don't go to the coffee shop one day, like that's what it's going to look like until I get there. So
Where do you want to go next?
oh, Japan is next on my list.
Japan.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have like zero desire to kind of go over to Asia.
Tell me why.
I don't know. Like when I say the people, it's not the culture or the individual. It's the amount of people. I don't like people. And you know, you see footage, you hear stories, you watch movies, and I'm just like, I could not imagine being in that densely populated of an area.
That totally
Right.
makes
I
sense. Yep.
do not like people. I love people. I just fucking don't like being around so many of them all at the same time. Like I don't even like coming into Salt Lake. I live in a small town. We live out west. It's, you know, it's a small town.
Yeah.
It's rural. I don't even like coming into Salt Lake because there's too many people and there's too many cars and there's too much traffic, and
Yeah.
I don't like it. So I think that's part of it. I think there would be parts of like Japan and Asia and China and things like that I would totally love to go to, but it's not like the cities.
Yeah.
I don't want to go see, you know, whatever see, that's the other thing too, is I'm super uneducated when it comes to like that side of the world and geography. But I don't
most of us are.
Yeah, I don't want to go to like the city of Japan, right? The main city or
Yes.
the country. I don't want to go and see skyscrapers and
Yeah.
neon lights and thousands and millions and millions of people. I don't want to see that.
Yeah.
I want to go to like the countryside and
Which they have too. I'm
Yeah,
just saying,
yeah.
they have that there too.
yeah, so that would be cool.
Yeah.
But you'd have to get through the people first, and I don't know if I'd want to do that.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. My little brother is the same way. He won't come visit me in Salt Lake because he hates people.
Yeah.
He hates being around that many people. Yeah, and I wouldn't want to live somewhere like that, but
Iceland would be cool though.
oh, yeah.
That would be a cool one.
Yeah, it is. Especially if you catch it. We caught it just like right at the beginning of tourist season, so there weren't that many people around.
Yeah. I
Highly
want to go
recommend
to New Zealand.
That's Jared's. That's my partner's.
Yeah, I
He
think
wants New Zealand
would be way
next.
cool. I think
Yeah.
Australia would be cool as well.
Australia is very cool.
Have you been to Australia?
Yeah, a couple times, yeah.
The only place I've ever been out. I've been to Canada, and then I went to Ireland last year. Yeah, Ireland was cool.
I'm like, I could talk about that for a very long time, but that would be very boring for everybody listening to your podcast.
Go to Ireland. It's beautiful.
It's amazing.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
appreciate your time.
Yes.
I think the people upstairs need to do whatever the hell it is that they're going to do.
Yes, I think they do.
Is there anything else that you want to throw out for our listeners?
No, I mean, do you mind if I do like a marketing plug?
Absolutely.
Is that taking advantage of you?
Not at all.
I have a Kickstarter coming up for the book that we were talking about, for the 2 books that we were talking about. So that'll run through October. Not
Okay.
sure when this is going to air, but if it runs in or before October. And you can just go to my website, which is just my name. So DesaraeLee.com, which I assume will be spelled
It will be. All
On
this
your-
information will be in the show notes.
fabulous.
So they'll have
Okay.
links to it.
Thank you for allowing me to plug that.
Tell me more about what are the name of the books?
We are still not fighting. We're still discussing. I'm doing it with a writer. So I'm illustrating and she's writing. And we're still discussing very cordially exactly what the names of the books will be. But the concept is kind of cool. So the concept is that the first book is kid-friendly, has a very positive message, like I was talking about earlier. And it's kind of, what happens on the front of a carnival. So she goes to visit a carnival. And then the second book is kind of a tongue-in-cheek, Edward Gorey style, all the dark things that are happening behind the scenes that she doesn't see. So it's going to be a really fun combo. I'm really excited to keep working on it.
Very, very cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Desarae.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
I appreciate
And it's DesaraeLee.com, right?
Yep, just my name. Super
Wonderful. Well, everybody go out and have a beautiful, wonderful day. That used to be my sign-off. I forgot. I don't do that anymore. I used to do that at the end of every episode.
I like it.
Yeah, it's nice. And then I stopped doing it, and I'm like, oh, it feels much better to not do it. After a while, I felt like it was, I don't know, I just felt like it was stupid.
Oh, no, I think it's so beautiful.
It is. It's good to tell people to have a beautiful day, but we'll just end.
Okay.
Podcast over.
Period. When it comes to art, people get very snobby about who an artist is or what an artist is. Taking medication for mental health has such a huge stigma in a lot of cultures. You're always looking for ways that your art can support you when you're making a living as an artist. I describe it as being in a car and you've got your seatbelt on and you just fly off the side of a bridge into the water. And your car is sinking and it's filling up with water and you have to escape and your seatbelt is stuck and you can't do anything about it.